All right, why don't we get started? Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I'm excited to go through this material. It's obviously something I'm passionate about, and it's pretty important for your health. We always hear about, diet and exercise, exercise and diet, depending on who you talk to. They might give you an idea of like one thing being more important than the other. And I think it's not as easy to say which one's more important for overall health in your life, diet or exercise. So I think they're equally important. So I'm going 50-50 on this one, but you can do a lot with exercise. You can do a lot with training. You can really improve your health by focusing on having your own plan that you work with. It's not anyone else's plan or not a boot camp that you join or trying to mold your fitness routine to somebody else. You want to be creating your own personalized plan. You might need help from people who are on your healthcare team. If you have health challenges, you want to check in with your healthcare team. If you need ideas, need things to try, sometimes, personal trainers can help. Obviously, physical therapists, chiropractors, people who are actively trying to promote your health and work with you. You can always bounce questions off of them when you're working with them. I would totally suggest that. We know that as we age, we physically decline. It's just the way it is. Even if you try as hard as you can, you'll still physically decline as you age, but you can offset a lot of it. So good news, bad news scenario. The bad news is if you don't lift weights, your physical decline will be much faster than if you do lift weights. So it's pretty clear cut. After the age of 30, our hormones start to change, and you lose, depending on your genetics and your activity level, about 5% of your skeletal muscle every 10 years, which ends up equaling like 20 to 30 pounds of muscle off your body over the course of your life, or maybe more, depending on you. But we want to slow that down. So the good news is, if you're consistently doing strength training, you're going to slow that down. And if you combine that with eating correctly, you can really maintain your skeletal muscle through your whole life, which is super important for bone density, for fractures, for sarcopenia, and other age-related loss. And honestly, for me, it's like not having fun and not being out there and being active as we age. And so we want to have general exercise kind of in mind. Again, that needs to be a personalized approach. And so you can do a lot with kind of an interval-based mindset. You can think of it in other terms, metabolic training or metabolic resistance training is a way to think about this concept. So that's what we're going to do today. Is I'm going to give you a framework for how to create an exercise plan that has kind of the interval training mindset or the metabolic resistance training mindset, which means you do a lot of hard work in a short period of time. So you get it done, you get the positive, stress on the system, so your body adapts and grows. And so the idea behind metabolic resistance training or interval training using for strength is you're doing specific exercises, combining a max effort using your muscles. So hopefully that makes sense. But you're basically trying to do resistance-based training to your fullest extent in a short period of time, and it's going to give you a major heart and lung workout. So you're going to be huffing and puffing. Your pulse is definitely going to be elevated, along with an intense stress on your muscles. So you get the benefit of doing both. And to me, that's the best way to go about this. It doesn't give you specific results if you're looking for a very specific outcome. Like if you want to be a certain physique, you have to train for that physique. But if you want to be strong, be lean, be able to have full range of motion with all your joints, and to not lose your skeletal muscle, to be active your whole life, this is a fantastic way to do it. So the sessions usually take about 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes to do one of these metabolic resistance training sessions if you're doing it on your own. If you go to a class, you'll probably spend a lot more time doing it, which is fine. But more and more, I think, will be forced or compelled to do things on our own or in smaller groups. So again, metabolic resistance training, it's the perfect blend with your heart and your lungs. You're going to be huffing and puffing, and you're going to have an elevated pulse, and you're going to put a pretty major stress on your muscles, all your muscles. It's a full body thing we're talking about here. And so there's an important concept you want to think about when you're picking what exercises to do. There's compound movements that your body can do, and then there's isolated movements that your body can do. Think about like a bicep curl as an isolated movement. So you're moving your elbow joint to raise a weight to focus on one muscle. And that's not ideal for this. Or let's say you're holding a weight with an outstretched arm and you're lifting your shoulder and you're just getting a shoulder workout. That's not ideal for this. So you want to think about compound movements. So that basically means you have to move two joints. So rather than doing a tricep, like a pull down, like if you get a cable or a rope and you pull it down and work your triceps and you're just moving your muscle, that's not ideal. You want to be doing like a push-up, which will work your triceps really hard, but also your shoulders, also your core, also your chest. And so when you pick your movements, keep that in mind. Do not pick movements that isolate single joints. That may be the case some of the time, and I'm fine with that. But for the most part, you want to try and pick movements that are compound, which means moving two joints. And you're trying to, so that's kind of a big picture of what you want to think about for your exercises. When you want to frame your session, I want to break it down even further. So your body basically does three things. So you push with your arms, you pull with your arms, and then you basically use your legs to stand up and sit down. So those are the three major moves. And then you have your core, and that's like 3.5. Because every time you do your arms, every time you use your back, every time you pull, anytime you use your legs, you're going to be using your core. So you don't want to overemphasize trying to do your core, especially if you're trying to isolate your core to like lose belly fat. That's not an ideal way to do it. You don't want to isolate your core. So compound movements, and then breaking it down even further for your arms, they push, they pull, and then your legs stand up and sit down. And so out of those three basic moves, you get all the exercises you're going to be doing. So for example, like for your chest and your pushing moves, maybe you're going to be doing some chest press, or maybe you're going to sit down and you're going to do an overhead press. And then you'd switch to, like, you start with a chest press, and then you switch to your legs. Maybe you'll do some deadlifts where you're picking a weight up off the floor. And then you'd switch to some pulling moves, like let's say you pull a weight or a resistance band from over your head. So like a lat pull, or you're pulling something towards you, like just a row. And then you might switch to core exercise. So compound movements, three major body areas: your chest, your back, and your legs, and then a little bit of core. And that's where your circuit, that's where your program, that's how you're going to frame your session. And usually, if you're a beginner, you're going to pick 3 to 5 exercises to cycle through before you rest. And if you're more advanced, I have people doing 6 to 10 exercises as like a circuit, and then they rest. And so an example might be you start out with a row, then you might do, like I said, like a deadlift, or let's say you do a reverse lunge, and then you do some push-ups, and then you kind of finish that circuit out with like a glute bridge or something for your core. And then you rest for a short period of time. So you're going to do a circuit, you're going to do a little cycle of exercises, and then you're going to have a short rest. During that rest, you don't want to completely recover. You don't want your heart rate to go back to normal. You want to make sure you go back in before you feel totally rested. So everyone's different there. If you're a beginner, your rest is going to be a little bit longer. A few minutes is fine. And then if you're more advanced, it's going to be less. So you might be resting for 30 seconds to a minute between your circuits. And each circuit would be considered one set, and usually a whole exercise session will consist of like 3 to maybe 5 sets. When you're doing your repetitions, you want to keep it standard. You don't want to do anything too excessive in terms of repetitions, and you don't want to do too little either. So you want to pick somewhere between 8 to 15 repetitions for each exercise. And that's going to obviously vary per exercise. It might vary as you get fatigued out during your exercise session, but that's kind of a general rule. So you get warmed up, you run through your circuits, 3 to 5 exercises, and then you rest for a short period of time. You don't want to fully recover before you do another circuit, and you can redo those circuits every single time. You might need equipment to do this. You can do a lot with body weight, but I've found that if you do have a couple of things to add extra resistance, it's better. So try to do body weight if you're a purist, but if you don't mind spending some money on equipment, I would recommend getting a pack of resistance bands that you can have attached to the wall or anchored to something really solid that you can use to push and pull and do all kinds of cool stuff with resistance bands. You can get free weights, of course. Dumbbells and kettlebells are really good. They're quite expensive these days because of the popularity of working out from home. But once you have them, they do last for a long time. So might as well get something quality. And I do recommend having some free weights on hand in general. So you might also want to do jumping rope. Some people have barbells laying around. You can use barbells. And yoga mats are really good. You need about 6 feet of space to do this stuff. You have to be safe, and you might as well do it on something that's semi-comfortable. So do it on a yoga mat, and then you need a pair of good shoes. So I wouldn't do this barefoot for the most part. You put on some shoes to protect your feet, and especially if you're doing any jumping or landing, you want shoes. Think about effort and rest. So 2 really important concepts. No matter what you're doing, you have to put out pretty maximal effort. You don't want to go 100% when you're doing your intervals and your circuits, but you want to be pretty close. And so that's why the circuit comes into play. Like if you're doing your chest and you go max effort, then you switch to your legs, you're going to allow your chest to recover at least a little bit. And then you might switch to your back, and then your legs can recover during that time. Each part of the body doesn't fully recover during the circuit, but you can kind of piecemeal through the different parts of your body to get a good stress on your system as you're going through it. So work hard. And it's not fun, honestly. I think this is the biggest deterrent for people when they think about doing this, is it's pretty taxing on the system, and it takes quite a bit of mental toughness to get through a session like this. So work into it slowly and take your time. For the first couple of weeks, you may find that you go less. I would encourage you to go less than your fullest extent to really get a sense of what your body does, both during the exercises, if you have pain anywhere, and then how you feel after. So that's really important to take into account. You don't want to burn yourself out after 1 or 2 sessions of doing this. To get the benefit of this, you have to do it consistently over a long period of time. So make sure you're putting forth pretty max effort when you're going through your circuits. So what does an ideal fitness routine look like for an individual? Well, if you wait too long in between your fitness and exercise sessions, you don't get the benefit. So you have to space things out just enough so you continually put stress on your system. So what does that look like? Well, if you're doing metabolic resistance training or interval training with a focus on strength, 2 to 3 days a week is awesome. I would suggest doing 2 to 3 non-consecutive days. So like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday would be perfect. You could do 2 days if you're a brand new beginner. You could do 1 day if you're a brand new beginner. You may not get a lot of body transformation or body changes, or you may not notice a lot of physical adaptations from just doing 1 day a week, but you're getting into the routine and you're learning the moves, and that's a good start. So as you move forward, you can add more days. I would suggest sticking to your routine for a while. At least a few weeks with the same circuit repeated over and over again. If you're just getting started, you may stick to that same circuit for months before you change it. That's totally fine. And eventually it's going to get super easy. And then you start swapping things out. You pick new exercises and you start over. or you take your current circuit and you kind of play with some of the variables to increase the stress, like how many times a week you're doing it, how intense you're doing the exercises. Maybe you change your repetitions. Maybe you add more weight. Maybe if you have a resistance band set, maybe your chest press with like a 15-pound resistance band gets super easy. So you move up to the next hardest band and you start doing that again because you like that exercise. It just gets too easy. So if you're not putting forth the max effort during your sessions, you have to kind of change some of these variables to continually make it harder, but you don't want to make too drastic of a changes either. So it's a very delicate balance of adding more stress to the system. So the other thing you want to do is keep track of your workouts. You have to keep track. You don't just want to follow a YouTube video, in my opinion, and you just don't know what you're doing. They're putting stuff out there and you're doing it. And then they put out a new video for the week and you do that one. And then they put out another video and then you do that one. And people get so frustrated in that cycle. Some people thrive, but I would say for the most part, it gets frustrating because you're not achieving your goals. You don't really have a sense of what you're doing. You know, you're working hard, but you kind of maybe fall short of where you want to be. So make these workouts for you. If you need to watch YouTube videos at the beginning just to get a sense of what you would like doing and what's out there, that's great. But once you have your circuit, like write it down and write down how many reps you're doing and what it feels like. And so you got to track these workouts, track your progress, and make sure you're achieving your short-term goals and also your long-term goals. Other factors to consider in like a holistic exercise program are do a day of low intensity cardio, which means go for a run or go hop on a bike, go for a swim, those types of things, elliptical machine, something that is low intensity. It's a steady state thing. Maybe you are running at the same pace for an hour. That's a fantastic cardiovascular exercise. It's a great way to have a holistic approach to a well-rounded exercise routine. Consider fun. You know, I definitely get burned out by doing this stuff personally. So I like to play sports. I like to, I'm in the ocean, I'm in the mountains. So my week consists of having as much fun as possible outside of work. So consider doing stuff that's fun to keep you generally active. That's fantastic. And then consider active recovery. So 1 or 2 days a week, don't exercise. Don't run every day. Don't do metabolic resistance training every day. You got to take breaks. You got to recover. You need to walk. It's important to go on walks and enjoy being outside and just chilling out and not being so vigorous with stuff when you're trying to have an exercise routine because it's not sustainable. So, stretching and foam rolling and getting a massage or maybe going to the chiropractor and getting adjusted. That kind of stuff is really helpful for active recovery. So a perfect week for me looks like 2 days a week of metabolic resistance training, 1 day a week of doing some low level steady state cardio, lots of fun. So I'm in the ocean 2 to 3 days a week. If I'm on a good week and maybe a little bit less or maybe a little bit more, if it's an outlier week, I'm in the mountains as much as possible on trails, running around, jumping off rocks, climbing up rocks, being active, being outside. So that's me. So I'm strength training. I'm doing low cardio. I'm doing maybe one intense cardio day where it's not really metabolic resistance. It's more high intensity cardio stuff. And then I'm doing a lot of recovery, a lot of relaxation. And so that's kind of the perfect exercise plan, in my opinion. So let's end it there.